Back in Britain in the last 10 years, things have turned themselves upside down as regards being gay or lesbian, or bisexual or transgender. It's a different world to when I was growing up under Margaret Thatcher. Sorry, does that count as a political comment? We're probably going to be investigated by the IRS now. Growing up under Margaret Thatcher, it was terrible. When I was 17 years old, I just left home under difficult circumstances, and I was living with my first boyfriend, who was 21 years old. Huge age difference. Huge age difference. Well, we were picked up on the way home once by the police, who, upon interrogation, discovered that we were living together, and that, in all probability, things were going on after dark, and sometimes even during daylight. And I was arrested. And so was Brian. And we were kept overnight in the police cells. And I had one of the darkest and most humiliating nights of my life. And that was because at the time the age of consent was 21 years old. And if you were under 21, but over a juvenile, you were facing 5 years imprisonment, theoretically, for being gay. I was charged at the age of 17 in a public magistrate's court with buggery and gross indecency. That tends to stick with a person for a little while. But again, that was the outworking of the consequences of telling truth. And at the time I did not understand this, but now I do understand it, that I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be walking the path with God who I am today if that hadn't have happened. But coming out, even though the pressures against it are gigantic, changes things. That was Britain back in the 1980s, 1987, actually. Britain today has full equality in law. Leon and I are married. And the difference isn't that the people of Britain are any better at all than the people of America, because I assure you they are not. The difference is that all of a sudden we got a huge tranche of public figures who stood up and were counted and came out. What they did was what, if any of you know Quentin Crisp, chap on the left, he came out in the 1930s. And he had a wretched life by external standards, but as John Donne says, to thine own self be true. And actually, in many ways, Quentin Crisp's life bordered on being an art form. By external standards and the standards of his parents, it was difficult, it was hard, but my goodness, he lived. And consequently, he got to be celebrated in film and photographed by Cecil Beaton, who could make anyone look beautiful. And that's something to aspire to. But we had loads and loads of people who came out, and because of their coming out, people like Sir Ian McKellen, Sir Elton John, and because of their coming out, all of a sudden, ordinary people who were sat at home, harbouring hatred and fears about homosexuality, they decided, well, I like him. They can't be monsters. Elton John's a nice man. He gives money to charities. And this sounds simple, but that's what started joining the dots. That's what started it. And then it began to pick up momentum, and then more momentum, and then even more momentum, until eventually we now have a situation where to be publicly homophobic in any way, shape or form is risking immediate dismissal from public life. And actually, to be homophobic verbally, orally to another person is risking a jail sentence. So things have come full circle. That was a British experience. That's not a reason for ordinary people to think about coming out. That's a broad social reason. That's saying, if we want to make it easier for future generations, and if we don't want future generations to go through what we went through, and especially older lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people, especially older people who remember just how hard it can get to stand up and be counted, then we probably have to do something about it ourselves. Can you conceive, can you imagine the possibility of Martin Luther King or civil rights if every African American had had the ability to pass? And not only that, had decided to pass. If a whole group of people behave as if something is shameful and to be hidden, we cannot blame straight society if they think it's shameful and should be hidden. Can we imagine, can we get any insight into how we would feel about Judaism if tomorrow 75% of the Jewish population of the United States changed their name to British or French surnames, started holding bar mitzvahs in secret, and started behaving to the outside world about what they were made as, was shameful and disgusting and distasteful and something which was not worthy to be mentioned in public. It wouldn't be long before we started to believe them. It wouldn't be long before we started to think there was something a little distasteful about it as well. The untruth, then, the untruth at the core of who you are, as big an untruth as changing the colour of your skin, or pretending to be a gender that you are not in your soul. Because that's another thing which is impossible to labour under for any length of time. I can only imagine it, but I am assured it's as heavy a burden, if not a heaviest burden, as labouring under the identity of hiding your sexuality. This untruth stands in the way not just of fulfillment in your life, but also of the Holy Spirit. Because we stand before God as God made us. And if we fashion this painted mannequin, this model of how we would like to be in front of our friends, our family, those closest to us, it's really, really hard not to start identifying with that painted mannequin, that model. It's really, really hard.